This is TWiT.
I think a lot of times when folks are confronted with these truths, it can be a little bit, in some ways, disheartening. It can be a little bit tough to chew on and recognize, and then sort of, take oneself and be active about it and think about what's next. And so as a sociologist, what are... And again, I don't want to, like you said, we don't want to place too much or most of the burden on individuals, but the individuals that are listening to this interview, what do we do? What do we do?
There's in one sense, as you said, like the problem, you can process the problem as so overwhelming, like it's coming to us top down, decisions, laws, policies, designs, bottom up ways in which users create this, like the chatbot example. So it's coming in all directions. And so my view is that precisely because the issues that we're tackling are so complex, so big, the tentacles of this problem are coming at us from all directions. What that means is also that each of those tentacles, each of those pathways that the problem is being produced are also ways that the problem can be addressed. We don't want each one of us have to take on the whole thing. We need to work in collaboration. We need to organize collectively to think about all of these different aspects and the role that we can play. And so if you think about people who are working in tech, I described the organizing that's happening there. Those people have decided that they have the most influence and power to try to hold companies accountable from within, because that is their workplace and that is their sphere of influence. There are a number of people working in the legal sphere that are working to litigate algorithms. Like when these algorithms have created havoc in people's lives, automated systems that have, been implemented in different states that have harmed people economically in terms of their health, et cetera. They have a group of lawyers that are trying to, produce class action lawsuits and create mechanisms that we can hold automated systems accountable legally. We have people like me working in education and academia that are trying to think at the even more fundamental level, like how do we train people in STEM? Like, how do we train computer scientists? Is it enough for people just to have the technical know-how without any sense of the history or the politics or the sociology of the very technology that they're producing, so that they're sitting in some boardroom in Silicon Valley and actually think it's a good idea to send out a team of researchers to go and target homeless people in Atlanta? Shouldn't there be someone in that space that has even a small, sense of this long history of historical abuses using science and technology on vulnerable people? So how do we train technologists so that, yes, there are accountability structures from the outside, but they also have a sense of this history and the politics of knowledge? And then, we have to think about whatever sphere that we're in, like hosting a podcast like this is a great service because it's raising public education, public awareness of these issues. And so we can each think about what our sphere of influence is to try to raise the awareness and empower people so that we don't allow these decisions to be made in a vacuum in the private sphere. Even though it's impacting all of us, most people don't think that they really have a say. They don't feel like they have the expertise to even question because they don't know all the technical terms, right? Even though they're impacted by this, they don't feel that they're equipped to actually be part of the public debate and public conversation. And so the contribution of a podcast like this is to actually bring more people into the conversation so that it's not a small sliver of humanity that's making such, big decisions that are impacting everyone else. And so whatever your passion is, whatever your field, whether even if you like to just play video games, within the video gaming community, there's all kinds of ways in which racism and sexism is perpetuated, normalized. People don't question. They think that to have fun, you have to accept these very harmful processes. And so even if the sphere of influence is one that on one level is about recreation and having fun, even that is a site to begin to question the norms and to ask yourself, is this a world that you really want to live in, that you want the next generation to live in which violence against different groups is normalized and perpetuated and is part of our culture? Even there, you can begin to question and undo these norms. And so really, because the problem is so big, we each have a role to play. We can each think about how to contribute to rethinking our relationship to technology, where we are the stewards. We are empowered to imbue it with our highest ideals rather than our basest ideals.
Wow.
Basest values, yeah.
So I love the idea of so we approach this with empowerment, and we approach this with trying to neutralize ignorance to the issues, and doing that through whatever form of getting the message out there and talking about these things. And, you know, I think about, being the person who's in tech among my family, I am certainly the go-to, hey, I've got this problem, can you help me with it? And a number of times, you know, my grandma has had an issue, and I am helping her through it, and she blames herself for having an issue with figuring it out. And I always sort of have this moment of you know, no, grandma, like you cannot blame yourself. This is a failing of the technology for whatever reason. And it breaks my heart, because I know that there are a lot of people out there who do feel that, you know, because they don't have the base understanding, or even in some cases a more advanced understanding, then the onus is on them, and like it's their fault that the thing doesn't work. And so I love this idea of using empowerment as a tool to help people feel more comfortable to become part of the conversation, because oftentimes I would argue that people would have that little gut reaction of like, oh, this feels weird and feels wrong. In the case of the Google thing, for example, I'm sure there were people who thought, I don't know about this. But they maybe didn't feel like they had the right words or whatever it was to turn that into something actionable. So that's, I think that's really powerful.
And, you know, and technology didn't create that sense of disempowerment. You know, it facilitates that. We see it in the realm of technology. But if we, you know, thinking again about root causes, like we have an educational system that more often than not makes people feel bad about themselves from a very young age. There's a small sliver of people that feel really empowered through education, you know, that are tracked to make them feel like they're gifted and talented. But a vast majority of people end up, you know, going through our educational system and are made to internalize that feeling that you described about your grandma. And it's not just a generational thing. Like there are, you know, elementary kids, you know, age kids right now that have been made to feel like they're dumb. You know, and so this way in which we have something called an educational system that is actually that crushes people's spirits and makes them feel like they don't have a voice, that is a much more fundamental source of the problem that we're talking about, that then materializes in the context of technology, so people don't feel like they can question technology or engage technology. And so, you know, this is what I mean by understanding technology is part of this problem, but it's not creating the problems that we're talking about. It might be enhancing it. It might be speeding it up. And so in that sense, you know, we need to zoom the lens out a bit and think about what needs to change in our educational system so that we create a citizenry that feels empowered to actually not just become good workers, right, and know how to code, but to question the design process, to feel empowered within these institutions and these systems, to be able to not just, you know, raise their hand when they see something going wrong, but to see it coming also, you know. And so this is the kind of rethinking that we need at the really basic level in terms of how we think about knowledge and knowledge production, and who gets to have a say.
Right, and because as you say, you know, when we're talking about this problem that's in place, and you know, you talk about the new Jim Code, the idea is not so much that this is a new thing that technology has created. As you say, it's a employment of new technologies that reflect and reproduce existing inequities. That are promoted and perceived as more objective or progressive than the discriminatory systems of a previous era. And it's the stuff, it's there. It's all the stuff that's there, and technology can sometimes give it more power because we choose to sort of say, oh, now technology's taking care of it.
Exactly right. And so it's that sort of letting go of our responsibility or our power vis-a-vis science and technology that enhances the problem, but technology didn't create the problems that we're dealing with, right? And so I think that reorientation actually means what I'm discussing and what the issues others are raising are not anti-technology or anti-science, but it's actually making technology more like bringing the responsibility back into the conversation. And so the one other silver lining, I'll say that, yes, we've had all of these historic patterns of inequity and justice, but one of the beauties of our current moment is that because the technology is reflecting back at us through the seemingly objective mirror, that's why I love this show Black Mirror also, is because it's reflecting back at us these things that many people have been unwilling or unable to reckon with, unable to address. Say, let's just go back to like employment discrimination. Many people make all kinds of excuses about why there are, say, more men in tech or more very few people of color. You can make all kinds of excuses to explain inequalities and injustices. And so that has happened for generations. And now what's interesting is that this technology that we were taught to think is neutral and objective is putting back in our faces these patterns and actually, showing us what we've been doing through the mirror of technology in a way that I think more people are talking about it now than ever before. And so what we're going to do with all that talk is another question. People can talk about problems and not actually address it. But I will say that more people and people who are kind of unwilling or unable to really reckon with the inequities that people have been trying to raise awareness of for generations are now much more willing to at least have a conversation about the fact that, well, if there's no gender discrimination or racial discrimination at your company, why did this algorithm that you produced to hire people, why is it actually discriminating against women and people of color? Like, what's making it do that if it doesn't already exist, if the training data doesn't have that pattern built into it? What's making this happen as a practice through this automated system? And so it makes us pause and think about, what is actually feeding this? Maybe we should reckon with this pattern that we've been unwilling to before.